Hey, as a prelude to this video, I just want to say if you have any recommendations for India, this is the first book I'm reading for India, but it definitely won't be the last. I want to read the Ramayana and possibly a couple books by Salman Rushdie in the future. So if you have any other recommendations, please provide them and I will look into them. And I look forward to reading a lot more Indian literature in the future or Bangladeshi as well. So please contribute. Thanks. Hello, friends of YouTube. Welcome back to Mike Reads the World. Today I want to do kind of a continuation of the Bengal region, which I started in the last numbered country, which was Bangladesh, with Tagore's The Home in the World. And just like Tagore, you could easily count Rokeya Hossain for Bangladesh or India. She was actually born in what is now modern-day Bangladesh, but ended her life in Calcutta, which is now in modern-day India. But of course, at the time, she was writing around the same time as Tagore. It was all British India. And so I'm just going to arbitrarily count Rokeya Hossain's Sultana's Dream and Padmarag for India, because why not? And I get to color off another country on the map. That's the arbitrary nature of what I'm doing. I'm not doing this to say that I read every country in the world. It's about reading great literature from across time and space, as I'm always reiterating and reminding myself. So don't take the country too seriously. If I don't know if Bangladesh is really particularly proud of one or the other. I have no idea. This is all about learning. And speaking of learning, this shows women's issues of the early 20th century in a number of different ways, through a science fiction short story, a longer realist, I would call it a novella, it's really not that long, and a third, a short critical essay by the author herself at the end. So you have three different works in here, and the thing that ties all of them together is pushing for greater women's rights to education is a main theme. I mean, a lot of other things are wrapped up in that. Women's freedom to escape bad marriages and so on, but the critical essay and the longer story of Padmarag really drive home the importance of education. But I want to start with Sultana's Dream, the science fiction short story, because that is, I think, one of the most deceptive and possibly disappointing if you're going into this expecting a long utopian sci-fi novel, which is kind of how the back of the book sells it, and even the cover, it is kind of based on that. But really, that is 10 pages. It's a very short story, which is kind of a woman's short dream, Sultana, her short dream or vision of this science fiction society where women are in charge and men are secluded in sort of an asylum type of thing. And it turns the patriarchal society that virtually everyone has known throughout history on its head, and imagines what it would look like. And she, of course, paints it very utopian. All needs are provided for, the climate is controlled by some technology, they have major heat rays to defend themselves from invading patriarchal societies, and it's really quite forward thinking in terms of technology and imagining flying cars. This is, of course, early 20th century Bengal region or British India, so it's quite imaginative. But I actually think Padmarag is the superior work, even though that Padmarag is a realist. Also, kind of features a society of women, but in a realist setting in Bengal, and it's this sort of organization, NGO type of thing. I don't even know if that term applies at this time, but it's a charity organization started by a woman named Miss Sen with her, she's a widow, and she uses the money her left over from her husband's passing to start this sort of charity, and starts taking in, women who have been divorced, have nowhere else to go, no work. She brings in women who had turned to prostitution. She brings in all sorts of women to this charity and starts educating them. And some of them get jobs as teachers or craftswomen. And so you have this sort of society set up. And much of the story kind of centers around the different women's stories, how they got there, sort of the bad things that happened to them. But unlike the sort of what I found to be vitriolic condemnation of all men in society that I found in Woman at Point Zero from Egypt, which I covered a few books back, I felt that this book did had a much more nuanced approach and showed particularly there's one central male character who becomes involved, who is taken care of first by these women at this organization, and then they help his sister, and then there's sort of some intrigue and mystery in a romance between him, or almost romance between him and one of the women at this place, but I won't tell you how that ends. That's kind of the major plot thread of the story. So, but this man is, he has his good, he has his bad, but I do think the book does a great job of showing how a man should be, and how a man should support a group of women trying to create a place where women who are left aside by society can thrive and still have a life, and how a man can sort of be a supportive role in that, even if he's a complicated character. So I liked that aspect of the book, and it made it much more interesting and much more nuanced. So as far as like the writing, it wasn't always the most enthralling writing at times, just for the reason that a lot of the major action of the book is told as stories, and this is something that has, I don't know, in certain books it has always bothered me, even since I was young, and this even bothered me about Lord of the Rings when I was like young, and it's bothered me my entire life, is when events in the story are told as stories by the characters. Even in Don Quixote, this bothered me. In part one of Don Quixote, when the action, like this whole long part of the story is just being told by a character. Now, if the whole novel is in that sort of, framed by a narrator who's looking back on it, that's a different story. It's just, there's something to me, even though it's supposed to be, I think, more immersive, it's something that's a little bit immersion breaking to me when I have to kind of like get inside. I'm imagining myself watching somebody talk out their story and trying then also to imagine their story. I don't know, maybe not immersion breaking is the right word. It's just something that I would rather the story just be narrated, without having it be set up in a situation where it's talking to other people. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know why that bothers me in certain books. Maybe it's when there's just not a lot of action going on in the main story, and it feels like the whole story is just people telling stories. I don't know. Sorry, that was a tangent. It's just why I guess I found some parts of the story of this Padmarag to drag a little bit. But I should really cut all that out. But I'm not going to, because I don't cut anything out. So, Rokeya, Hossain, Sultana's Dream, and Padmarag, both interesting works. I won't put them in my favorites, the greatest things I've ever read. But something to learn from, a new perspective, a more nuanced perspective too of sort of a woman's place in society. I thought Tagore did a great job as well of developing Bimala's character in Home in the World, but it was nice to get kind of a stronger message about different women's scenarios and kind of offering a very practical and powerful solution. In fact, the critical essay at the end, that's the final thing I want to talk about. It's an essay called God Gives, Man Robs. And actually, the main theme of this essay, it kind of starts by saying that it's not Islam, for example, that prohibits women from taking an active role in society or having freedom to choose. It's not ancient, Hindu culture that does it. It's sort of this society that's been built up over years. The laws and rules put in place are totally products of man and civilization, and not anything to do with the religions or the traditional idea of femininity, for example, shown in the Mahabharata or Ramayana. I don't really know if that's true, but that's the impression I got from this. But this sort of vision that educating the women and the girls is the biggest step forward that they can make. So she kind of concludes this essay by presenting a vision of a feminist vision of the future where women can be educated but also maintain sort of the traditional role of femininity in their culture, and that they don't have to take the sort of Western, the totally liberal Western ideal of women as their way of moving forward. So it's interesting. It's an interesting essay that I think is makes kind of a good point that perhaps every region of the world and in different cultures have their own ways of moving forward, and that we don't need to throw out all traditional ideas about how about women's roles in society to achieve an equilibrium or equality, whatever you want to say. But her view is that education is just the key. That we all need to be educated, and that will produce a better society. So that's what I got out of it. Anyway, I'm sure there's people that may say that I'm misinterpreting her message here, but she directly quotes the Mahabharata here, where she says, the cares of the family, the effort to advance the happiness of others, these engrossed them, talking about women. They were loyal and steadfast in times of endurance and hardship, and proved to be, in the words of the Mahabharata, a companion in solitude, a father in advice, a rest in passing through life's wilderness. We should by all means broaden the outlook of our girls and teach them to modernize themselves, yet they should be made to realize that the domestic duties entrusted to them cover a task on which the welfare of the country depends. So, of course, just kind of taking it out of context there, just to give you an idea of the argument. But you can find a lot of these things in Padmarag, these similar themes: the importance of education, the idea that it's not the Islamic religion. A few of the characters in Padmarag are Muslim, a few of the women, and it's got that approach in Padmarag, but that it's really something in society that can be changed and can coexist with culture and religion. So that's all I will say about Sultana's Dream in Padmarag for today. I definitely will say it was a worthwhile read, even though I won't put it among kind of my favorite books I've ever read from a literary standpoint. It was a nice perspective, and there were a few moments of nice poetry in it, nice poetic language, and yeah, that's all. So we'll see you next time. I'm not sure what book will be next. I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy reading. See you next time on Mike Reads the World.